Hello, everyone. I'm Josh Scott. Welcome back to Over Opinionated. I have a guest. His name is Darrell McCain, host of the Darrell McCain Show, a former Navy veteran, and we would like to give him a great welcome to the Over Opinionated podcast. And with no other left to do, here is my friend Darrell McCain. So, welcome to the podcast, Darrell.
Uh, Thank you for having me on, and congratulations on the launch of your show and your move and the new marriage. I'm very excited and where this is going to go, and I see great things coming. So, thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you. Thanks for all the good words, and I appreciate it. And a big thanks in trying to get me, helping me get started in the podcasting world. I've definitely always thought about it, but I was just hesitant because how many people do have podcasts, and but I'm really interested. I really like the format. We've talked a lot about people like Rush Limbaugh, and if Rush was starting out today, he'd probably be starting out like this. And
Yes, yes.
so, you speak the truth as much as you can, and so I want you to come on and we can talk about anything. And but I know you've been keeping up with the Fox News and the lawsuit. So I just guess I wanted a few of your opinions on Fox News, Tucker, and the lawsuit with Dominion.
Well, to be honest, this is a big deal that I really did not see coming. Personally, I found it very um, surprising that this actually happened on my birthday. And Tucker Carlson was one of the people on Fox that I actually did go out of my way to watch because of the populist stances he does take. Um, I did read his book, and I thought it was very good. I watched the debate between him and Gene Huger, and I don't think a lot of people know that Tucker Carlson, when he was in a different version of himself. Tucker Carlson is like the one that discovered Rachel Maddow. He does his part when he's at his best to be very nuanced about certain topics, and I think he got caught in the wave of the model of I'm just asking questions, and that slipped into something where they named a very specific company, and when they named that very specific company, that company said, "You guys have hurt us because you made specific claims about us to an audience." And this happened repeatedly, and that's where the rub really happened because now it's one business, Dominion Voting Systems versus News Corp, another business. And this wasn't just a uh, defamation lawsuit in the sense of it's a media figure versus individual. So slander is very hard to prove in court. It was a company suing another company saying that your employees allowed this to harm us. And it was they were suing them for $1.6 billion. When I looked at News Corp, which is the people that own Fox News's earnings, the Fox News portion was for this current quarter. The cash they had on hand was, and I'm going to be humble when I say this, only $4 billion. So you had one company suing them for almost 40% of what the cash they actually have on hand, and it was such a massive amount of evidence in this case that Fox just settled outside of court. And it was very shocking when they did it because most defamation lawsuits end long before it gets to the discovery. Most judges know that the standard is very hard to prove, and they just throw them out, you know, just like that. What made this one very different is in discovery, somehow Dominion voting systems got privy to the private text messages between the on-air talents. So you have the text messages from Lou Dobbs, you have the text messages from Maria Bartiromo. You had the text messages from Tucker Carlson. You had the messages from Sean Hannity, and you had the text messages from Rupert Murdoch, and that's what made this very different because now you have the specific people who are the primetime hosts saying thing A in their private conversations, and people will talk very frank in their private conversations, and a lot of times saying the exact opposite when they got on the air, and this was about specific claims made about Dominion. And basically, what I feel like it happened in this case was the same thing that happened to Glenn Beck. Glenn Beck was a very famous person on Fox News. He was a very highly rated show at the time. He did engage in what a lot of people would say were conspiracy theories, but it was very educational. Glenn Beck was very entertaining. You learned something on that show, whether you agreed with it or not. But what happened is capitalism hit Fox News because people forget at the end of the day, Fox News is a business. It is a news station, but it's in the news business. It's not NPR. It's not PBS. It's not C-SPAN. All those things are publicly funded, so they don't actually have to make money. They can just report boring news. Fox News actually, as a corporate entity, is a multi-billion-dollar company, and when Glenn Beck's show started to hit a lot of controversial topics, the advertiser said, "Yeah, we don't want our ads on his program." So the board of directors over at News Corp, they they, they fired him, or they didn't care how popular the show was, because they responded to the demands of corporate power. And I think this same thing, and this is speculation, happened with Tucker Carlson because when you have him being so vividly explicit in his text messages, there's one text message where Tucker Carlson talks about President Donald Trump, and he says, "I hate him passionately." you know and how do you get that audience back if privately you're saying you hate Donald Trump, but publicly you're one of his most vocal allies? Privately he's talking about Sidney Powell is crazy and I caught her in a lie, and he's telling Laura Ingraham the lies that Sidney Powell is telling is not fair to their audience. He says our audience are good people and they don't deserve this, and then about 2 hours later, he has her on the air to spread said lie that he doesn't believe. You know, and the case that Fox News really was trying to put everything on was this was a newsworthy event because a former president was saying it. And Dominion was saying, no, but you guys were also backing it up. And what I think also happened was when the judge decided that the president of News Corp, Rupert Murdoch, could actually be subpoenaed to testify, that's when the board of directors said, absolutely not. You're not going to get Rupert Murdoch in court on TV. We are not going to haul in Sean Hannity and have him on court saying, we lied. You're not going to haul in Tucker Carlson. You're not going to haul in Maria Bartiromo. They have already fired Lou Dobbs. There's a text message where Rupert Murdoch said North Korean state news TV has more nuance than Lou Dobbs. If that's what the president of the corporation is saying about his talent, then they were basically suspecting that a reasonable, prudent audience, jurors would say, the president thinks that all his hosts are liars, but he thinks it makes them money, so he's telling them to do it. And then there was a course correction where they were trying to get the Fox News anchors to put out a statement saying that the stuff that Donald Trump and Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani were saying wasn't true. And there was the day before where basically they started to push back on some of the claims, and the Fox News audience revolted. They went to Newsmax and other more conservative media, and within 2 days, Fox course corrected, and they gave their audience what they wanted to hear, and this is what got them in trouble. So when that $787.6 billion lawsuit hit, I mean $1 million lawsuit settlement, and that was so big that the board of directors stepped in and said that this is has gone too far. And not only that, they got hit with another lawsuit by Tucker Carlson's producer the day after that trial, saying that she had been coerced to go to court and lie on behalf of the network, and she sued Fox News. So Fox News has just got the $787 million settlement. They've been sued with the former producer, who they now believe is the one that was releasing everything in Discovery. The judge has sanctioned Fox News for lying during the trial and saying they withheld evidence in the discovery. And now Smartmatic is also suing Fox News for the exact same thing, but they are seeking $2.6 billion, which, if you do the math, that's almost 90% if you add the other suit of the promise that they made. So I think the board of directors said, yeah, now we've lost money when this whole business model is to make money. So, yeah, and Tucker could say whatever he wanted to say as long as he was bringing us money. Now he's lost us over half or a quarter of what we made all year with the cash we have on hand. And these other this other company, Smartmatic, is suing, and they're using the Dominion as a pretext because now they already have this evidence. And I think Fox News said, if we keep this guy, we're effed. He's got to go. And then what made it, I think, even more on the nose is after all this stuff is released, Tucker Carlson has a sit-down interview with Donald Trump, and this is after Fox News just settled out of court, where then President Trump repeats some of the same claims that they just got sued and settled over saying. And so I think that Rupert Murdoch and the board of directors are like, okay, so Tucker's doubling down now. And after that, there's a guy that released all those documents. Tucker Carlson covers the release of the documents. He focuses on the most sensationalist part of one of the documents, and then now it's been confirmed that that one story that he focused on, that document was edited. It wasn't true. And I just think that network's saying, all right, this guy's got to go. So on that Friday, the 21st, Tucker Carlson signed off, and with all intent and purposes of thinking he's going to be on air that next Monday. He even said what he was going to do, who he was going to interview. They played commercials of him all day long, and then we just got a statement. Tucker Carlson and Fox News have decided to part ways, which is code for he got fired. They did not tell him that he was leaving the network because why would you want to tell somebody who's got free live TV on air that this is their last show? You have no idea what they're going to say. And I've seen them do the same thing happen to Keith Olbermann. The same thing happened to Melissa Harris Perry. The same thing
Didn't
happened
they
to
do the same thing to Bill O'Reilly?
Yeah. It's a business model that they're not going to let you know you're going to get fired.
Well,
A lot of
the only thing that is so much to unpack. I hate to interrupt people, so I'm not trying to interrupt you. That's so much to unpack, and this is one reason why I like podcasting more because we went on about this for a few minutes because it's so detailed and important. Cable news, you can't do that. They would have had someone screaming at you within the first 5 seconds. So I like this format. Um, but
But I also think the last thing I'll say about it is also the cable news model is a failing model, and it is a fake model. It is actually propped up Fox News, MSNBC, CNBC, ABC because it comes already in your cable package. And what's happening now is News Corp is getting ready to renegotiate with Cox, Verizon, Fios, and all that, and those companies are basically saying, we're not going to automatically put Fox News in the packaging. People have to buy it as an add-on. And that is what Fox News is afraid of, that people will not actually pay for that as an add-on. And then they lose that money for it already being in the cable.
well, they'll have to totally re do their business model. And I know that they're doing the app with the Fox Nation and whatnot, but they'll have to totally redo their business model. But they had such a stranglehold on it before the internet came out, and before we could see everything, and before that, before cable TV, just having newspaper. I mean, the internet has changed the news business completely. So, for a
Yes,
good thing.
and also I think that the pandemic made people very skeptical of institutions, all of them, including the media. And they started to question what was going on and to question everything and to do their own research and to do more digging. And they realized all these professionals are not they don't know anything. They're in on the take. As the late Boomer comedian George Carlin used to say, it's a big club and you ain't in it. And and then there's a lot of leaks start to come out, and you got TYT says this and Fox News says that, and you started to see the audiences started to go to people that seem like they're more authentic. They're sitting in their houses doing stuff, and there is no way a cable news network can mimic that. And I think it's been a dying industry for a very long time. It's one of those things where they because the model works on what I call like crowd capturing, it puts them in silos where you stop taking them seriously because you see their opinions change as election cycles change. If you used to watch MSNBC back in the day, you could find anybody on there. Pat Buchanan used to have a show on that network. Pat Buchanan had a same was sitting at the same network as Phil Donahue. With Rachel Maddow and Tucker on there, and Joe Scarborough and Lawrence O'Donnell. That was it wasn't just seen as a lefty network. It was all sorts of different voices, and what they tried to do was mimic what Fox News was doing, because what Roger Ailes did was Rush Limbaugh was such a powerful, amazing figure at what he did to keep an audience captivated for 4 hours every single day was something that Roger Ailes wanted for network television. And what they realized was it wasn't just that everybody thought that Rush Limbaugh was correct, it was that they knew he was entertaining. And so they tried to mimic that on air, and a lot of people, the criticism was is that the people did not know what they were getting. That you were getting an opinion, but it looked like you were getting the news. And I do challenge that a bit, you know. But I think that sometimes the problem comes with us as well, because we know what we're getting when we tune into certain networks. And you can't help the fact that, you like what you like, you want to go to stuff that's like minded. And so, if, as a business model, a business is going to try to feed you what will keep you there. And so it was almost by design it was gonna fail eventually. You know.
Oh, absolutely. No, like I would as much as I disagree with the Young Turks and Cenk Uygur, there's no doubt that this man is passionate and believes in what he believes. He puts his money behind his work. I mean, the man ran for Congress, and he sponsors a lot of Justice Democrats. I disagree with a lot of his philosophies, but I'd much rather watch him than Rachel Maddow or listen to him. I'm not saying Rachel Maddow is not a woman of conviction, but there is a
Well,
difference there. There's a difference there.
I will say this. I used to, as I was growing up, used to really like Rachel, because me personally, my style of politics is I like the polarizing people, and I've always liked the outsiders. I liked when I was growing up, everybody that knows me knows I had an affinity for the late Rush Limbaugh for several reasons. I think the most particular was he made politics entertaining and interesting for me. And then on the left, John Stewart, you know, made it cool to kind of talk about politics, but he also poked fun at people who were trying to be stuffy and important. And I thought Rush Limbaugh was doing the same thing, except Rush Limbaugh explicitly honestly said, I am a conservative. And I don't think that he gets enough credit for that, because a lot of times people try to pretend like they don't have opinions while they give you their liberal view, and it's like, why don't you just put on the top of the show liberal news, and we can just pick if we're gonna watch it. Don't pretend like these facts just fell down from on high. You read this somewhere from a specific institute. That specific institute may just be a liberal institution. Why not be honest? Why do you have to treat us like we're a bunch of idiots? And I think that that is kind of what started to happen over time. That corrosiveness of starting to blur what's news versus what's opinion, and not just being able to honestly say this is my opinion. But when Rachel first started, I really did like her show. Um, but then I realized there was a certain a point in time where I couldn't watch it, because Rachel Maddow to me became the Glenn Beck of the left, where it was just very conspiratorial. It was, and it's like you cannot really prove any of these things that you're saying, and it was almost if she had a tinfoil hat on.
Well, I think a lot of that.
Very unhinged.
I think a lot of that became super true, or especially true with the Trump Russia debacle.
Oh yeah, I agree.
And that's one thing that gets me. Don't get me wrong. I definitely think Fox News is guilty of this. I mean, that's why they settled, because they thought that they would lose more money. They didn't want their show. They didn't want their show host and executive directors to be taking the stand in court. That would have been awful for business. So they settled. And but I definitely think the left is just as guilty, even if they haven't been called out as much. I mean, they you have the coveting Catholic kid, and they got sued for that, and the gentleman won quite a bit of money for that debacle.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that is true. And I think what it is too is what they don't want to say is that conservatives are right, or they have a point when they make the critique that most of the media is liberal. And I would just say it's almost as if they would be liberal by design because of the institution that they happen to be sitting in. And it's not like a lot of conservative um, people growing up think, "Well, I want to be a journalist." That is seen more as like a feminization of a workforce. So they wouldn't have wanted that type of profession. You know what I mean? So it's almost
Speaking
just like,
truth, the cliche of the holding them accountable, and speaking truth to power. I mean, um,
and it's also there is a romanticization of certain figures from the 60s, and they see themselves as the media in that point in time failing, Walter Cronkite failing, Ted Koppel and all these people failing, because look at all the things the boomers got wrong. And so they have this critique of the problem of them just reporting the news and not having an opinion about who was right, Barry Goldwater or MLK, who was right, was the Vietnam, was Eisenhower correct or was Nixon correct? And I think that they fashion themselves as activists, and they think it's their responsibility to protect certain institutions, and I think they're wrong, and also that's not their job, but
and
that's kind of confusing.
that's why I have more of a respect for people like Cenk Uygur and Ben Shapiro, who say I'm openly liberal, or in Cenk's case, openly democratic socialist, and Ben's case, I'm openly conservative and libertarian leaning on economics. So I have more respect for people
Yeah,
like that than someone that gets behind the desk like Don Lemon and says I'm a honest to God journalist.
yeah. Well, and also I think that if you read Matt Taibbi's book Hate Inc., it shows that is they know that's a good business model. To somebody gets elected, so Donald Trump gets elected. It's actually proven in the data that during those periods of time, MSNBC and the Human Rights Campaign and Media Matters for America and pro whatever. Uh, they make a lot more money when they are actually out of power versus when they are in power. Because when they're in power, they actually have to legislate, and now they have to carry the water for the people in power, and so it becomes very obvious. And but it's also so they stick to these topics that are going to gin up the audience. I mean, you have 50 states, and they will find the most polarizing governor, mayor, or police chief in the state and say, "Oh my God, a police chief in Arkansas did this," and they make that national news. Well, look at what the Republicans are doing. It's like, actually, that one dude in Arkansas did that, and then you're purposely scare your audience to keep them to tune in. Tune in next week to see what other crazy person does.
Oh, for sure. But no, I remember when a lot of this happened. Come from conservative background, conservative family. When this election was happening, I had questions about how the election was being handled. I never jumped on the gun of Donald Trump. Was completely stolen the election. We've talked about before. I think he legitimately lost, but I think there are also legitimate criticisms of the election and of how people took advantage of COVID rules, and a lot of these
Yes.
in a lot of these blue states. I still think he lost, and I've had a lot of these arguments, but I remember when this happened, and when all of this is going down, and people are starting to talk about the alternate electors, and a lot of people in my family, a lot of people in my circles were turning off Fox News and going. The only person they kept watching on Fox News was Tucker, and they kept going to One American News or Newsmax, and and it just seemed like Newsmax was just a cheerleader for President Trump. And listen, I understand being defensive of your news source. I had a very liberal history teacher that would always talk bad about Fox News. That upset me a lot. I watched Fox News, and I was a conservative, so I watched Fox News. But he's watching MSNBC and Rachel Maddow every night. So, like, we don't need to get to the point where if we're a Republican or a liberal or a conservative or a Democrat, we don't need to get to the point where we're like defending our news organizations like they're the gospel. Even if they're more right or left leaning, we need to hold them accountable.
I think that what that is too, sadly, is a lot of people in education have bought into the propaganda, and they got high on their own supply, and to where they really don't like the fact. And I was explaining this to somebody today that if you were to see somebody with a "Make America Great Again" hat on, you would automatically feel triggered and scared. And I said, that's the problem. That you wouldn't think that that is an American who has the right to have a view that's different than yours. And your job as a fellow American is to protect the view of people, even if you disagree with it. The very essence of an actual free society is to fight for views, even if you think they're detestable. The very essence of a mature society is to try to allow the most maximum amount of liberty that you can apply, even if you think it's going to be used in a nefarious way, because there will be rioters in the system. And this is what I think about guns and speech. The entire point of the Second Amendment is the freedom means that somebody is going to use it in a bad way. The entire point of the First Amendment is people are free to speak, which means that somebody inevitably is going to say something stupid. That's the cost of being free. I don't understand why people are afraid and scared of, in a free society, people actually exercising a tad bit of freedom. The people on the news stations are allowed to be wrong, and it is what it is, and you're allowed to watch them and believe them, and I think I think what we get trapped in a lot is we start to think that this is not a battle between Democrat or Republican. We think this is a battle between good and evil.
Exactly
And
right.
when you
Yeah, exactly right.
and then when you put your arguments in that type of way, you cannot compromise with somebody who is evil. And I need to say, like, this is the problem because I am fairly young, just turned 37 years old, and I am old enough to remember when the left went on and on and on about George W. Bush is not the legitimate president of the United States. The election was stolen, and his brother was the governor of Florida, and they stopped the votes, and the Supreme Court gave him that election. And I remember Maxine Waters talking about how she did all the same stuff, did all the same stuff,
It's kind of
and
crazy.
I
It's kind of crazy to me that you're talking about Maxine Waters 20 years ago, and she's still in Congress now. That's a different topic, but
Oh
and
yeah, we could definitely talk about that too.
but
But it was just like so. I'm gonna make this one quick, but so and then you had people like Michael Moore, who still gets to walk around in polite society, and that's fine. Making movies like Fahrenheit 9/11 and saying that the president of the United States helped Osama bin Laden in Saudi Arabia perpetrate 9/11. That was what was being said as I was growing up. I remember it intimately. And then George Bush gets 8 years in the White House, and guess what happens? Republicans return the favor. Barack Obama gets elected, and Barack Obama is not even a citizen. He has a pseudonym. As a matter of fact, his wife is really a man named Michael, and he wasn't born in Hawaii. He was born in Kenya, and he is going to usher in the Muslim. And I was just like, first off, I lived in a Muslim country. There is no way to be a strict Muslim. There's certain things you can't put in your diet that we'd all know. You have to pray 5 times a day. Basically, we would have all caught you, you know. But it was just like that was the what he wasn't ejected legitimately. The election was stolen, and I always sat back and thought, wait a minute. What nobody ever says when they engage in this, the election was stolen stuff, is when these elections are happening. Well, George Bush is president. Uh, why is he allowing Barack Obama to steal the election? He's over the CIA. He's over the FBI. He's over the NSA. Why is he saying anything
well,
about this?
well, no.
Nobody ever.
As
When
much
when
as
when
as much as I
when
don't
you have
like President Obama's policies, I mean, if he stole that election, I mean, it was just this perfect Democratic year, and I mean, he won by way over 300 electoral votes. He won Iowa, he won Indiana, he won North Carolina. I think it's pretty safe to say. I mean, he's
but
winning
but
Republican
my
states.
but my thing is, even on the same token, when liberals were yelling and George Bush stole the election and da 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 da, I'm like, so a outsider was able to steal the election while Bill Clinton is president, one of the most corrupt people known to man. This doesn't make any sense.
And his vice presidents running for
yeah,
reelection. I mean,
you have
election.
you have the entire weight of the government on the side of the outgoing president. What actually happens is Americans are, it's just a thing we do. We like to go from Democrat. All right, well, we gave them a chance. Now I'm a Republican. Now we do that. We say, well, actually, now I'm apathetic. I'm going to sit this one out, and we do that back and forth. They get just like Virginia. They get the Democrat for 8 years. Next thing you know, there's a Republican, and it's like a game of whack a mole. But it is very rare that I have seen anybody win and then people just say, "Yeah, we lost." Opponent ran a great campaign. they always say no, they disenfranchise our voters, or the FBI did X, did this uh, tech agency did B, the NSA, and I was like, all right, man, I get it,
Right.
you know,
Now,
or
and
you just
it's not that there's never cheating in elections. I think there's cheating in almost every election.
oh
But
yeah,
is it to the fact where the other person's going to win or lose? And can we pinpoint this and say, well, in this instance, let's go after justice here and not go crazy about it? I mean, Hillary Clinton's the biggest hypocrite about this. She, on the debate stage, she's talking bad about Donald not conceding the election. Well, I mean, she
mm-hmm.
might have, and then she might have conceded, but then she cried that Russia screwed her out of the election. So I mean,
and and this is what was so funny about that anyway. What they are talking about, Russia did was to have bots on tech websites, what ginning up supporters and this, that, and the third. And what they famously like to leave out is that, by the way, the CIA does the exact same thing in Russia, because that's what all foreign powers do to each other. If you go back and look at what the former defense secretary for Barack Obama said as he was leaving, and they said, is it normal for China to and other foreign agencies to interfere with elections? And he literally laughed as he was doing his exit interview and said, yeah, sometimes. Probably all the time. Yeah. I say that's what superpowers do. They literally have a favorite person they would like to be in the office because they're talking about negotiating. These are global powers. And if you have something like a propaganda or tech, or you're going to use it, they're not bound by U.S. law. They're going to use every means necessary to influence our policy. I mean, I used to watch Russia Today all the time because they had interesting news on there. But according to the CIA, that was election interference, a station that had been around for years. This got so ridiculous with this Russia crap. They posthumously went back and started to say people who were long dead before that election happened were Russian agents. They accused the old former MSNBC host Ed Schultz of being a Russian agent. What? So MSNBC, long before Hillary Clinton even thought about running for president, was infiltrated by Russia. So Ed Schultz can tank the Hillary Clinton campaign 8 years or so after he's dead. This doesn't make any sense.
well,
It didn't pass.
in politics, if you wait long enough, everyone becomes a hypocrite, and everyone ends up on the opposite end, and that's why I'm just, I
Yeah,
think, I think,
that's what me and my um other sister podcasts. I'm happy to invite you to the. You can decide if you want to be
yeah, you can give
sister or
them
brother
a
podcast.
plug if you want to. That's okay.
Well, yeah. So it's just the T-Bone and Tickford show with Lusky, and they don't do politics. It's kind of a comedy thing. They talk about cooking. They do birthday boosts and burns. It's very light. They guarantee one laugh per episode, but it's very funny. Now the host T-Bone is a libertarian with conservative leanings. His co-host is the exact opposite. So they don't talk about politics on that particular show, but he is like kind of a Rush Limbaugh style of conservative, but he's very funny and very caring, very giving. Also from Florida, so and he was actually my mentor when I was in the Navy. Really got a lot of love for him. But what I was telling him about this type of thing is this is why I've considered myself, at least in the American form of politics, to be a libertarian, only because I've recognized that there is a hypocrisy in the sense of the second someone gets into power, they immediately try to silence the other side. And they kind of play this little game back and forth. And when I was growing up, the liberals were so convinced that it was Jerry Falwell and the moral majority and Pat Robertson, and they're trying to silence everybody, and they want to kick gay kids out of the Boy Scouts, and all this type of stuff. And then about a few years later, it was them. Well, this triggers me, and you shouldn't be able to say this in college. Or they're shouting down college professors, and then it switches a little bit, and now it's like, well, I don't like this book, and I just like they both play this little game. You should call this such and such advertisement and tell them you don't want this person on the air. Or you could just do this magical thing and turn the station. I'd have to, and it's that thing. It's not when you engage in that behavior. It's not just that you are diminishing or stopping somebody else's right to speak. You are stopping yourself from having the right to learn and to hear. The whole point of like going to college or all these places is you are forced to deal with ideas that you disagree with and learn how to engage with them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm glad we could talk about all that. I am interested in your 2024, um, faults or highlights from candidates. I have, I am, I do have a couple notes on the Democrat primary. Believe it or not. Now, I think it's pretty. I think it's pretty obvious that Biden will win the Democratic nomination. It's almost impossible to beat a incumbent president for the nomination. I think the closest that's ever happened was when Senator Kennedy from Massachusetts. I think from no, I'm sorry, Senator Kennedy was challenging LBJ before he was murdered. Unfortunately, I think it was the closest that it was probably going to be, and LBJ stepped down for some people say because he thought he was going to get beat. Other people say because of health issues. He died 3 years later. So, but his son Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is primarying Joe Biden, which
I think I have a bit of well, first off, this being said, I'm terrible at these predictions, but I did predict that Donald Trump was going to be Hillary Clinton, so I'm good on that one.
Well, I wouldn't have predicted that, so you did better than I would have.
But I will say this: I think that Robert Kennedy Jr. is not to be ignored, and I do think the media is doing their best not to cover it. And I also think that Marion Wilson has some populist views that also cannot be ignored.
I was going to bring her up as well. Who do you think would be more favorable versus Biden?
Robert Kennedy Jr.
Okay, is that just because the Kennedy name, or
not only that, because a major block of the Democratic Party is black voters. Black voters are very skeptical of the medical industry because of the historical things like the Tuskegee experiment. Black people, even like especially the Black American Muslims, like the Louis Farrakhan types, the Nation of Islam, they are very anti-vax. Black people in general do not like to go to the hospital unless it is in dire straits. The fact that there's a government forcing the vaccine on people that historically don't really think they really care about our health really made people very conspiratorial.
Well, and I don't think Biden would have won the Democratic nomination without a lot of African American support in South Carolina. I just don't.
Correct, and that was all because old Jim Clyburn. We don't know it. Joe knows us, and we know him. Jim Clyburn is a sellout. If you go to opensources.com and look at where Jim Clyburn is, so open sources allows you to see who is giving certain candidates money. You know who Jim Clyburn's top donor is? It's a pharmaceutical company. And then, and so, of course he's going to come out and be against everything people need. He was against Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders was trying to get a certain type of Swedish style, Nordic style healthcare system, which would have obviously hurt the profit motive of Jim Clyburne's top donor, the pharmaceutical industry. And then Joe Biden comes out, and guess what he does? He goes along with the people who have kind of bought and sold us and said, you guys have been mandated to take a drug. And I said, look, this is all a trick. First off, Barack Obama gets elected and he mandates that you have to have health insurance. It was only a matter of time before somebody mandated that you had to buy something with it. You know, one thing always leads to the next. It's not a coincidence that his vice president makes sure that you have to take the vaccine. Only given to you by their donors. And that Jim Clyburn of South Carolina, you go look at who's his top donor, and oh by God, it's a pharmaceutical industry. It's not a conspiracy. It's sitting right there in plain sight. They sold us out. So at the end of the day, you have that block of the African American voters who, even though they may not know that part that I know because I'm a dork and I look up stuff like that, Robert Kennedy is saying all those things. He does not believe in I can't say all of the vaccines, but he did not believe in the forced vaccination of the COVID, and he was very vocal about it. And he cannot be poo-pooed as some crank or whatever because a large portion of the Democratic voters believe him.
Okay. Do you think that Robert Kennedy Jr. It's going to be very hard to beat Joe Biden? He's the income president. He's going to have a lot of donors. But do you think he would be able to hurt him enough that maybe it would rock the boat? Okay.
Yes, I do, but it all depends on a very specific thing. So Donald Trump, people think about the electoral college and blah blah blah. Oh, Donald Trump lost by this millions of votes. But when you really get to the nitty gritty of the numbers, it's like 40,000 votes in this state, 8,000 in this one, 11,000 in that one. That is not a large, portion of people. If you have a certain amount of a population like the African American community or Black people. I don't like the term African American. I think it's a bullshit term. But if you have this large majority like of Black Americans who are normally Democrats with this person Robert Kennedy, and they feel like he got screwed, they may just sit this thing out. They already don't like Joe Biden. The establishment of the party likes Joe Biden. If you are engaging in Black media, they don't like Joe Biden. They saw Joe Biden as a useful force because they were convinced that Donald Trump was blah blah blah.
Just a useful idiot, a placeholder.
Yeah, but if you saw a constituency, a lot of Black males liked Donald Trump because he was saying stuff that they said. And Joe Biden, in the era of Black Lives Matter, it cannot be denied that Joe Biden was the one who was the president of the Senate when all those crime bills that the Black Lives Matter crowd hates. Joe Biden helped craft those bills. He wrote those bills. He was the president of the Senate when that stuff happened. Black people know that. They don't like Joe Biden.
That's interesting because I've heard, I don't know, I've heard mixed things. I really thought that they might not like Joe Biden, but they definitely, and obviously this is not all Black people, but just a lot of them, and but they definitely liked Barack Obama, President Obama, and does that correlate? Does that trickle down to Joe any at all? I mean, like I said, I don't think he's president without the African American support in South Carolina.
But it was like what the Democrats have figured out is what I think the Republicans have figured out as well. Barack Obama's popularity is not transferable. Black people just liked him singularly by himself, and they don't really care who he hung out with. Just like they loved Bill Clinton. They didn't care. that he was married to Hillary. Could care less. Not interested. Just not that into you. you know. And I think it's the same with Donald Trump. People like Donald Trump. They don't like diet Donald Trump. They want the authentic. And I think Barack Obama hit a perfect note only because he was a very good speaker, and he reminded them of those Baptist black preachers in the way he gave the speeches. And I think they kind of were seduced by him in that way. And Joe Biden is just not that. He can barely get through any sentences.
Well, I don't like. I mean, he had a fight with Corn Pop.
Yeah, and so I think that it's one of those things. Now you are starting to see the rise of more prominent black conservatives like Glenn Lowry, um, you know, Candace Owens, and people like that.
Well, and
And it's not like,
one of my favorite, the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Winsome Sears. I've met her in person.
oh yes, and what's actually crazy. I knew that she ran. I knew that she's a former Marine. I got to listen to her recently on Real Time with Bill Maher, and I was impressed with her.
Oh, absolutely.
And
One of my biggest regrets is not taking a picture with her at Stafford Morris dinner a couple years ago. We had a bunch of candidates. Almost all the statewide candidates came to the Stafford Morris dinner hosted by the Giles County Republican Committee, and I'm from Giles, and obviously there's a lot of people you don't know who's going to be the nominee. I wish I could. I got a picture with Glenn Youngkin. I have a couple with him, but I really wish I got a picture with Winsome Sears. I really like her.
I feel like this is a perfect storm to where I actually do think Joe Biden is very vulnerable. And in the same sense of, I think Americans in general are tired of what they see as dynastic politics. I would have never thought that I would have lived to see the day where Democrats are yelling, even though they have control, for one of their Congress people or senators to step down. And I'm talking about Dianne Feinstein. And they're saying this is ridiculous. This woman is barely alive. She's got to go. She's missing key. And this is not from like the crazy AOC version of the Democratic Party. This was Amy Klobuchar saying she needs to step down. And Nancy Pelosi came out and said, Ro Khanna was sexist for saying it. And Amy Klobuchar came out and said the same thing. We cannot do what we need to do because this woman is too worried about her legacy and whatever to step down. And I'm like, wow, they know that the voters are tired of it, that they want, that COVID showed them, and Donald Trump did this. You have enough money to just give us checks. Everybody all at one time. I'm tired of all these platitudes, these empty platitudes. Deliver now, or we're not going to vote. It's not going to happen. We're not. It's not happening. And so they are. I've seen more calls from people for, we need to have a meeting about reparations and college now and funding for teachers, and we're going to strike, and calling Howard Schultz up to Capitol Hill to testify, and Wells Fargo gets called to the Capitol Hill, and I say, like, yeah, Americans now are saying, no, I don't just believe what you're saying. You better deliver now, or we will chuck you out of here. They're electing younger and younger representatives. They are throwing out the old guard. They're questioning whether institutions are legitimate. And I think there's a realignment happening in America where, black people used to be Republicans. Republicans is a big tent party, and I think it was only a matter of time before the shifts of the two parties slowly started to get back towards each other, to where it's like, the news model that we listen to are in on it. These institutions are in on it. They're all protecting themselves and they're against us. It's a bunch of millionaires telling us that the billionaires know what's best. And
Well, I think it's interesting, and obviously I'm as about as white as snow, but
what?
yeah. But Winsome Sears, when she was going around Stafford Morris dinner, she gave me a little pamphlet, and she actually ran a campaign for Trump. It was the Blacks for Trump, I'm pretty sure, and but she was saying, black people are actually conservative. That we just have are conservative on social views, but their family has voted Democrat for so long that's just it's been ingrained in them. Just kind of like the union workers, and now she was making a campaign pitch, but like when it comes to the woke stuff, we've talked about the woke stuff, and you said a lot of African Americans are not into they might use the term woke. That's where the term came from, but they're not very into the LGBTQ community stuff. They're not very pro-abortion. A lot of them are not very pro-abortion, and I guess that's my part of my big question. I wasn't trying to direct us into this, but I guess it just kind of came about.
I think that's true. Um, and I there's a lot of stuff to be unpacked when people say that, and so I don't want to just gloss over it, but I will say this: Martin Luther King was a Republican. Jesse Jackson was a Republican. Al Sharpton, yes, that one was a Republican. It used Huey P. Newton, like all these people used to be Republicans. There was literally only one reason why they switched to start to vote for the Democratic Party, and it was Martin Luther King when he was, because people don't know that Nixon was the first president to lobby for like Eisenhower, or when he was vice president, to get um, Martin Luther King out of jail. Um, Richard Nixon founded the EPA. You know what I mean? They think that's a liberal organization. The EPA was founded by a Republican named Richard Nixon. Yep, that one, that very same one. You know what I mean?
Right.
And what actually happened was, at that point in time, Barry Goldwater, who was a libertarian, had something. He was right about it in the essence, but you wouldn't understand it until about 70 years later.
Sure.
So what he was a libertarian who believed in very limited government, and he had this pastor, a very young pastor by the name of Martin Luther King, who was demanding that the government do social redistributive property things, our social our money transfers of wealth redistribution. You can go read Martin Luther King's book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, etc. When Barry Goldwater won the nomination and Martin Luther King was at the height of his popularity, and as a political maneuver, JFK started to side more with Martin Luther King, and so did RFK, and that totally erased the entire portion of everything they were doing before that. People failed; they don't like to talk about the fact that Robert Kennedy used to be on the McCarthy committee. That worst part of American history where they're rounding up people saying you're a communist. Yeah, Robert Kennedy was one of the district attorneys and helping round the people up and charging them, and that same one. And so the whole thing of Martin Luther King was nothing more than a pastor leaving the pulpit and using faith to interject that into politics. And Barry Goldwater was saying that was inappropriate. There's supposed to be a separation between the church and the state. And he actually has if you go look up Barry Goldwater's quotes, he talks about, I have seen these pastors, they do not yield. They do not understand the government is about compromise. And it was just like, and it was taken as like, we can't, and you hear uh, years later, LBJ saying the exact same thing that Barry Goldwater said. The tapes are released. You can hear LBJ telling Martin Luther King, "You're only worried about this issue and this issue and this issue. I'm worried about this, and all these things." And Martin Luther King was just very singly focused on, "I want the passing of a voting rights bill. I want the passing of a civil rights bill. I want the passing of this." And when Barry Goldwater was nominated, all the people who were on the Martin Luther King side of the fence switched parties for that one election. It was just supposed to be a one-off. The funny thing about that, just as a rabbit trail, you know who was on the side of Barry Goldwater and not Martin Luther King? Hillary Clinton. Who helped who Martin Luther King was on his side? Mitch McConnell. That's how crazy politics are.
Yeah. Well, I think Barry Goldwater got a lot of unnecessary flack and being called a racist and all this. And Barry, I'm not saying he never said anything racist, but to the best of my knowledge, Barry Goldwater was not racist. He was saying that this is wrong to say the government should say you can't discriminate based on race because it will lead to bigger problems. And we've seen some of those problems with religious discrimination and when it comes to the Colorado baker saying he doesn't want to bake a gay wedding cake. But a lot of racists definitely like that. I mean, he won the whole Deep South and his home state. I'm not saying that makes him a racist. I'm not saying that at all.
Well, and the whole thing is, I think we have to understand, we have to be adults about this and be like, look, politicians are going to do this really cute thing where they engage in politics. You have to know when somebody's actually telling you something nuanced in their beliefs versus, all right, I'm going to Kentucky now, so I have to say some stuff to get these voters out.
Yeah.
But the whole thing, when it came to the principles, what happened 20 years after that? The moral majority popped up, and then the left was basically becoming Barry Goldwater because now they didn't like that Jerry Falwell was saying these things. They didn't like that Pat Robertson was running for president. They didn't like the foundation of Liberty University. They didn't like Regent University. Why are these people taking their faith and bringing it into politics? The state, they don't even pay taxes. Wait a minute. I thought that we celebrate this one dude who was literally a reverend. You make sure before you say his name, you say Reverend Doctor. So he's the only one allowed to use his faith in politics, but nobody else is.
Well, and especially when they talk about abortion, if we took Reverend King from the grave and everyone that uses his name that is champions of abortion, I think he would be pretty upset about.
Not only that, if you go read what he wrote about those things at the time and what he thought about Margaret Sanger and stuff like that, he would to this day be considered very conservative, only because he believed in, well, he obviously believed in education because he went to school and he got a PhD. He wasn't an atheist because he was a Christian. He believed in family values because he got married. What they cling to is stuff like, okay, he sinned and he cheated on his wife. And that is true. Very wrong. Should not do that. And I say, you condemn him for that. And you say, we all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. You can go look at some of the saints and you say, yeah, they did stuff like that too. King David put somebody on the front line so they could die so he could have the man's wife.
Sure. Well, it's the principle that he was trying to uphold. It's not the fact that he was a man and fell short.
But also, I think a lot of people don't know because the way we are bad at history is that when he was leading those movements, he was in his early 20s. And he made the mistake of a man in his early 20s. You know what I mean? And separation from his family and all this stuff. And it's like, well, we don't go around, and he didn't write any books about marriage. That's not what we know him for. You know what I mean? But so it's just like, I think that's a problem. We do that a lot. We look at the one thing somebody has done wrong. We try to discount all the other things they've done right. And but either way, so to get to what the Barry Goldwater thing is, that was supposed to be a one-off. Then JFK gets killed, and LBJ, as a tactician, as a pure political move, you go read his books. LBJ starts to get that civil rights legislation passed, and it basically says this is to honor JFK, and that's when the black people or black people joined the Democratic Party.
Well, I
And
mean, the
but JFK,
legislator, the legislators, the Congress that helped pass that was predominantly Republican.
yeah, but it was also one of those things where, it was LBJ is quoted as saying, "When we pass this vote, he said we will lose the white vote for the next 50 years." That's what he said, and I tell people you have to think about history. This was not that long ago because people who marched with Martin Luther King are still around. Not only still around, still in power. Mitch McConnell, Bernie Sanders, both there, both at the March on Washington, both marching Martin Luther King, still in power. Jeff Sessions, literally, they wrote a letter about Jeff Sessions that they didn't like him, just got out of power. You know what I mean? So it seems like sometimes we're having these fights and we never go anywhere because our leadership hasn't gone anywhere. We're still fighting the battle of the 60s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a big proponent of term limits, and I think we've talked about this before. But it's crazy to me. Maxine Waters been in Congress for 20 years, and all these people. I'm not saying you can't have a voice in politics, but I don't. You should never make your personal career as being a politician. And if we place, we did it more recently in the Constitution, but if we say that if we say the presidency should be limited to 2 terms, should the legislator not also be? And we agree on this, but some people, don't, and I don't think it'll ever happen because the people that, and this ain't conspiratorial, it's just true. The way you'd pass that constitutional amendment is through politicians that have legislative seats.
Yeah, yeah. And we agree on this in the sense of when I look at the Constitution and I go juxtapose that to the Federalist Papers and I go look at what the founders wrote, it's very easy. They wrote a lot of stuff. I don't have to guess what they thought about this. They did not think that the Congress and the Senate and the courts were supposed to be subsidiaries of each other. They did not think one was supposed to overrule the others. They saw them as co-equals. And if the rule was set for one, it was supposed to be set for all. The Supreme Court was not supposed to be supreme. It's just supposed to be the third branch of government, an equal branch or a co-equal branch of government. When FDR got so many terms, I think he did 17 or so years. I have to look it up. But,
He
he
won four
died in
terms.
office.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he had polio. Everybody was perfectly fine. The American people kept voting for him. LBJ literally tried to stack the courts. Literally. I'm sorry, FDR literally tried to stack the courts. You know what I mean?
If it wasn't for this, if it wasn't for the Southern Democrats, he would have.
Yeah, you know what I mean. And the country allowed it right up until he was dead, and then the Congress stepped in and said, "Well, no, we can't do that because he was in power for so long. He was able to behave like a king." And I thought, now that may be a legitimate point, but my thing is, what if the person that you could see physically and with your eyeballs, visually, can behave like a king? What can the people you can't see, and most people don't know who their senators and congressmen are, how do they behave? You know, they behave like little, kings, or what I call like philosopher kings of our time. You can't. They're unreachable. A lot of them. You call their offices, they don't answer. They have, do 2 terms. I think they get a lifetime salary, lifetime benefits. This massive pension, and they make more money on most of the median income of most of the cities and states they represent. The salary is like $140,000 starting, and it's like, how could you, with a straight face, take a salary that way and always give them, every time it ever comes up for a vote for them to get raises, they constantly give themselves raises. When your constituents are all on food stamps, the latest poll that just came out was 60% of Americans, Republican, Democrat, Libertarians, anarchists, socialists, whatever, 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And every last one of the representatives make a minimum of $140,000 a year. That is a scandal. And you know why? Because they vote that they can get that money. And so it's like, yeah, they need term limits. They need to have the same term limit as the president. And I think that the scary thing is, so do also the courts. And that is a difficult thing, but I think that when I think about a history thing, that is at least what one founding father wanted, and he was very extreme in his position, which was Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was so extreme in this position. I think you would know this because you're kind of a history guy. Thomas Jefferson thought the Constitution itself should be rewritten by every 50 years, and Thomas Jefferson said that the Constitution itself would make the people slaves to the past.
Yeah, well, he always came back to the point that just like the colonies or the newly formed independent country should not be subjugated to the rule of Great Britain thousands of miles away, the future country should not be subjugated to men that have died 200 years ago. So we need to get together every so often, throw away the old constitution, make a new one. I'm kind of glad we didn't do that, but I definitely think that we should. I think it should be easier to make a amendment for sure.
Uh, or if we can't because we don't trust each other, maybe the legislators actually legislate, and they don't want to legislate. They actually, I was very kind of, I'm not going to say shocked, but I'm hoping that Republicans have noticed that as of late, since the Republicans have now given us divided government, that they haven't tried to tackle all the reasons they were elected to tackle in the exact same way that the Democrats didn't do it. The Democrats didn't do anything to tackle inflation or gas prices or anything that they ran on. No, of course not. They can yell and give little speeches and take bullhorns and talk about gun violence. They had the Congress, they had the Senate, they had the presidency. Did you see any gun bills proposed and passed? Nope. So now when the Republicans are in charge, oh, you just don't want to do anything about gun legislation. Actually, you guys had 2 years of power. You didn't want to do
Well,
anything about it.
they did pass that one gun bill, but it was not nearly as big as they wanted.
Yeah, and it's not going to do a damn.
Right, right. I know what you're saying. And this was my thing that drove me crazy. Why, Trump built his whole policy. I mean, Trump in 2016, his whole campaign is build the wall, and he waits 2 years to start building the wall when Democrats have control of Congress. It's like, why'd you wait so long? That's what drove me crazy.
And I don't blame that. Now, this is not going to be me trying to be a Trump apologist. I don't
That's
blame
okay.
that on Donald Trump. I blame that on the circle around him, because the dirty little secret is that Republicans and Democrats, richer people, they like the cheap labor, and they know illegal immigrants come into the country illegally and work for their donors for pennies on the dollar. And what they do is they undercut the actual American worker. And you see this happens because in liberal factories where the owner says he has liberal values, okay, if Apple is so liberal, why do they keep shipping the manufacturing jobs to Bangladesh and shit where they pay the workers 33 cents an hour? If he's so liberal, why
Right.
don't he put his money where his mouth is? No, he just knows he can say platitudes about I accept gay people or whatever. Yep, I accept you enough to be able to work for nothing and starve to death. That isn't. They're not giving them anything. So the dirty little secret is the donors. Not the president. The donors like cheap labor, and that comes from illegal immigrants. And cheap labor undercuts actual Americans who deserve to be paid for the work that they do. And I see it in even in Virginia, the part of Virginia I work at. There's a construction place right up the road. Everybody knows they come in mass. All the illegals come in. They always only have cash. Big $100 bills are 50s. All the people who have citizenship, they have cards and photo IDs. So everybody knows it. And we know what's happening. We know exactly where the hotels are that they stay in. If I know it, why doesn't Border and Customs Patrol know what's happening? Why aren't they there? Because they are paid very handsomely to pretend to be dumb.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
so
think that's very interesting. I definitely think one day I have you on. Maybe the next time we have you on, we'll try to talk about some um, campaign finance because I think that's something that's very interesting. I think it's kind
well,
of hard to
the
tackle
sad
too.
thing, the sad thing is, to be honest, it's perfectly legal. And I don't, I as a libertarian, I don't know how to solve that problem.
Well, it's
I can,
kind of
I can,
hard because it's kind of hard. Federally, we do have a limit that you can donate to actual candidates, but there's no limit to donating to super PACs, and that's where that a lot of that goes.
yeah, and it's like and this is when Mitt Romney ran back in the day, and the corporations are people thing. Corporations are made of people, and Citizens United, and I think that it's what it is like. Yeah, I don't know how a government cannot be influenced by people who they see the most. And the people they see the most are the people who give them money and
Yeah.
who have a litany of lobbyists to lobby on their behalf to say, hey, this is what we like. And before you know it, you are saying exactly what they say because that's who's always in the
Well, I'm
room.
not going to say that this would ever work, and this would be more of a left wing idea that as conservative as I am, I think it's not just a left wing idea; it's more of a populist idea, I think. But it comes from Andrew Yang, and he likes the idea of freedom dollars. If everyone gets $100 every federal election, and they can donate it to president, any campaign they want. Obviously it's from the tax. It's from tax money, but that would supposedly help, not fix, help the problem because you're giving individuals money and they can donate it to campaigns.
I mean, I, I mean, at this point, when it comes to stuff like that, I say, yeah, right. You have to think about it. I juxtapose what he says with the fact of income inequality in the sense of that $100 per citizen is not going to account for the fact that three people in the United States currently have more money than the bottom 70%. They're going to literally look like, oh, you have $100. That's cute. I have this many billions of dollars. I looked at all that money Bloomberg spent just to win American Samoa. Billions of dollars. You know what I mean? This one person spent. You had this last election to me was somewhat disgusting. Only because It was an election where you had the billionaire current president, Donald Trump. You had the billionaire CEO for Starbucks, Howard Schultz. You had the billionaire CEO of a construction company, Tom Steyer. You had the billionaire CEO of ex-mayor of New York, Mike Bloomberg. And when everybody is dirt poor and they're forced to be home and they're fighting to feed their families, 4 billionaires are flaunting their wealth in front of us, saying, "Vote me, I alone can fix this." This is definitely, it was one of the most, and I kept thinking, I don't know why people are accepting this. You know what I mean? It was grotesque. And that's why I say, like, yeah, these billionaires are like, just trust me, I ran a successful business. Like, yeah, how do your workers feel about you? I don't know. I found it like I don't begrudge anybody for being successful. But I do know that there's this Bible that I read that says it's harder for a rich man to get into heaven than for a camel to fit through an eye of a needle. I don't admire somebody because they have $1 billion. I wonder what you're doing for the least of these. And don't tell me, well, I'm going to do a lot when I become president. But I spent 70 years doing nothing.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that's one thing you can talk about campaign finance forever, and I've had debates about that, and it's a hard issue to tackle because those rich millionaires and well, those rich billionaires really, it's not the millionaires, um, are going to try to funnel their money into politics to further their interests, no matter what
But,
you do. If it's
but
through
I
a
also,
super PAC or donating directly to a political party instead of the candidate, so it's very hard to tackle.
but when it, and it's just kind of like a tie things back together is they also do stuff like buy news corporations. The former owner of Amazon literally bought the Washington Post. He's supposed to be a Democrat. Well, if you're mad at the Democrat for doing it, you know where he got that from. The mega donor of the Republican Party who just passed away, God rest his soul, Sheldon Adelson, bought up most of the newspapers in Las Vegas so they would give him positive coverage. That is what they do. Bloomberg, the billionaire, literally founded a paper so they can give him positive news. You know what I mean? It has a whole news network. Rupert Murdoch, the billionaire, has Fox News, and it's just like It's not just that they rigged the political system; they own the news networks, so they control what we see. And what people don't, I did an episode about Tucker Carlson. And I said, even though I like Tucker Carlson's populism, Tucker Carlson is a trust fund baby. His name is Tucker Swanson McNear. He is the heir of the Swanson fortune of the Swanson Food Company. And they put him on TV like he's the everyman. On the flip side, CNN has Anderson Cooper up there, which is literally a Vanderbilt. You know what I mean? His family built the railroads in New York. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure he's going to shake up the system. These two millionaire, trust fund babies yelling back and forth to each other to tell us what's best for us.
Well, that's why we got to do what we got to do, and
that was a part of the reason too why I really wanted to do this podcasting thing, because I stopped believing that and Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders were people that made me feel this way. This is somewhat a game, and everyday people need to use the thing that they have that nobody can take away from them, their voice.
absolutely.
And
That's why I think we have to do what we have to do, and we're both blue collar people. We both go to work every day, but people think that you have to be rich to know politics. And I'm not saying I'm a genius in politics, but you don't. You have to read, you have to talk to people, you have to relate to people, and then you have to give your opinion. And sometimes you have to say I was wrong. But Fox News doesn't ever want to say they're wrong. MSNBC doesn't ever want to say they're wrong. And you have to go out there with conviction. For me, when it comes to Christianity and the gospel, if I have someone that's encouraged by this, by a spiritual show, or if someone committed their life to God, that means more to me than winning a vote. But
Yeah.
we have to keep doing this, and even though it's small, it grows. You have a decent sized audience, even though it would be considered small to someone like Tucker. But
Oh yeah, yeah,
how
yeah.
much do you mind if you can say no, but do you mind how many telling us how many people you have listening to you right now?
What's actually crazy is I'm always very humbled when I look at those analytics. Now, like you just said, on a scale, it's actually fairly small. But even the little highlight reels that I put on YouTube just the other day, and it's just the visual voice thing, I'll get a thing back and I'm like, oh, you had 1,000 views on this video, or you had. So when it comes to the podcast, I think when it came to the analytics, I looked at it last time, and I was getting about 10,000, and I was shocked. But
Is
I
that
also
ten
have
thousand? Is that 10,000 an episode or 10,000
no.
followers?
So what actually normally happens is it'll be like I'll post an episode and I'll get at least about 500 or so people listening, and then over time I'll start to notice that there'll be like months where it's very high, and then it just kind of goes up and down. And what I do like about the platform that I use is the analytics allows me to see which episodes are getting listens, and they're somewhat all over the place. Like when I did an episode on gas, and that one was like through the roof. Within 24 hours, I had like 980 people listen to that to that one episode, and I was like, "Oh wow," you know, and 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 it was just me saying like, "Look, these people who own these stores are price gouging us. I need you to understand that. Yes, there are deals that we're not privy to. We don't have a say in what happens between us and Saudi Arabia and how many barrels of oil or whatever. Or now we're going to get oil from Venezuela. We don't have anything to say about that. You know what I mean? Except we don't like it. And but there are people who own businesses who decide I'm going to raise this gas by 87 cents. And I think we have to call those people out and say, I know what you're doing. This is not Donald Trump and this is not Joe Biden. This is you as a business owner trying to fleece people while they already are hurting. And so I feel like that especially when it comes to what you just said about blue collar workers, Christian thought, and stuff like that, that I believe, and we can talk about this a little bit too, that my my goal is to talk to the few, not to the many. And my biggest thing was to put this show out and make it sound as professional, as decent as possible, because, and I think the algorithm has proven me right. Over time, people will listen to episodes I did a year ago. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, wow. I did pretty good on that episode. And at the time when I did it, I was kind of discouraged because I didn't even get the numbers that I thought I was going to get. And then it's like, oh, somebody, I just got 47 downloads last night from an episode I did a year ago. Oh,
Right.
that means that somebody is literally scrolling through. I've done 338 episodes. Somebody has scrolled through all that. They're like, oh, this is interesting. And then I say, that's what I have done. I am, people write books. Noam Chomsky wrote 119 books. Well, I didn't do that, but I've already done 339 episodes that you can go back and listen to and be like, I wonder what Darrell thought about the George Floyd, whatever, when it happened. You don't have to wonder. I did a show about it. You know what I mean? When they were trying to get the young man, oh, I have a blank about the name, that the shooting, and everybody was saying he was guilty and he did this and he was going to go to jail and he maliciously did this stuff. And I said, that is not true. He did live in that area. His parents worked there. Why are you acting like a 30-minute drive is a long drive? I drive 35 minutes to get to work.
Yeah, that's
Like you
me.
guys are.
That was me living in Harrisburg, driving to Princeton, West Virginia,
Yeah,
crossing the evil state line that was 30 minutes away.
yeah. Oh, he has no ties to the community. Oh, so now he has no ties to the community. But you who live in California have an opinion about Mississippi. Stop being a bunch of
Well, that's
hypocrites.
very true. I mean, that's very true. But no, I guess my main point is we don't do this for money. I make very little money off of this. I have one Patreon, and she's amazing. Thank you, Anita Sexton of Woodville. And I've pledged that whatever I get from this, I'm going to put back in the podcast. And if I ever make a good
Yeah.
amount, I'm donating to a pro-life charity. And so this isn't for money for us. This is because we care about the issues, we care about our voices, and
And I feel like, I think I've shared on my show with you. You probably didn't listen to that one. I said I'm going to be your second Patreon when I heard what you said, and that's just because, man, I had one Patreon, and I had one person that believed in me, and I used to work with this person in security, and saw something in me and saw that I was smart, and it was just really always was thought security was beneath me. And I used to be like, I don't think any job's beneath anybody if it's putting food in your
so
mouth
true.
and stuff like that. And this person, he's my patron by the name of Gene, literally bought me not only this microphone I'm talking through to you through, brought me this expensive $2,000 computer. Like somebody took their hard-earned money and said, and I believe in this, and they gave me that, and I said, I'm not going to waste this.
Right.
You know what I mean? If all somebody can give is $3, it's just like that Bible verse where the person comes up there and they give all of this, they give this, and then this person comes up there and they give the 2 pennies, and then they get ignored. It's like this person has been justified because they literally gave you everything that they had. They gave you all they could give, and that's how you know they believe in you. And the whole thing is, I will say this: if nobody ever gave me $1, I have the reward of being able to say what I believe to be true.
Absolutely.
And I have the ability to critique people. I can play a clip of Rachel, of Tucker, of Crystal, of Sager, of um, Charlie Kirk, of Sam Cedar, and literally critique them, what they've said, tag them in it, and they're not going to respond. But I guess what? Somebody's going to read that hashtag. Sam Cedar is wrong about this. And I'm not trying to debate the host. I'm trying to get his audience. I'm trying to get them to be like, this is more nuanced than you think. And I was very flattered and humbled in the sense of my grandfather who raised me. I was raised by my grandparents, recently passed away. And my grandmother told me every day they used to put this show on and he would listen. And I was like, yeah, the audience of one meant a lot to me. It meant more than anybody else.
Well,
my parents were business owners, and I just don't have the desire to manage people. I just want to manage myself.
yeah.
And
Well, I think it's awesome. You say you have about 500 episode and people go back, but it really is, it's really just about that one person that maybe you could change his mind on something, or get him not only change his mind, but maybe think differently about something and get him engaged, because politics is broken when you say that there's nothing that can be done here because everyone's corrupt. Well, that's what they want you to think. You have to be engaged.
Totally agree. I totally agree. And I stress this in the Black community that they feel like their voices aren't listened to, and they voted and they didn't get anything. And I say, you know who's the highest? I say, you didn't vote. I say, guess who votes all the time? And everybody always falls for it. They say, who? I say, the guy you work for.
True.
He's always there. He votes. He's at the city hall meetings. He's at the school board commission. I said, if voting was a waste of time, do you think a corporation would put money into elections? No. You think a corporation who his whole goal is to make money, puts money into politics because it's not important.
Right.
So as an average day, hard working American, I don't care what your skin color is, I don't care what your political um, persuasion is. It is your right and your duty to have your voice heard because there are more of us than there are of the people on top of us. And I think a lot of times my critique is, and people butt heads with me about this, I say I'm an economic extensionalist. I don't care if somebody's racist. I don't care about any of that stuff. Are you paying the people correctly? Are you treating people with dignity and decency? I don't care. Oh, this politician didn't like black people. Okay, who cares? That's his right to not like who he wants to like. We could talk about that in a moral thing. How do you treat them when it comes to like policy? Is the policy fair? All right. I don't. I'm not. I'm not in the business of trying to make people. I'm not running for the like Olympics. You know, I want them to pay people. I want them to I want people to have a decent day's wage for a decent day's work. I want people to get decent health care. And I don't care what party delivers it. I don't want our seniors thinking they get to retire and get 30 days off, and before you know it, they have to go be Walmart cleaners. And the only way you know this guy is dead is because he didn't show up to work. I don't think that's right. And I don't care what party delivers the goods, but I want the goods delivered. I pay a lot of taxes to be. I tell people I was proudly a part of the Tea Party, taxed enough already, and I've taxed enough already too. And I think a lot of people are too. And if I pay taxes, you can at least fix the roads. You can at least let the parents have a say on the books that are in the schools. You can, we our taxes should go to something. We should have a say, not just a person who's a millionaire or a billionaire. I can't help the family that I was born in, but I am doing the best I can with the resources I was given. I don't think anybody's better than anybody. I don't think anybody knows more than anybody just because they get to be on TV.
I think that is so true. Well, Daryl, I think we had a great conversation. I definitely want to do this again. We can talk about um, taxes. I mean, not just taxes, but campaign finance. Um, we could have a spiritual episode, and I like those just as much as I like this. And but thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for encouraging me to step up and start the podcast. And you can definitely give your plugs here, and we will definitely see you again.
Well, I'll just say this. I said this today to my friend. I said I met this guy, and we did security together when I lived in Southwest Virginia. I moved to Southwest Virginia almost on a sabbatical. I had just left the federal government employment. I was working for the Department of Homeland Security, which I actually don't think should exist. But either way, and I moved to Southwest Virginia for a humble life. And I met this guy one day on post by the name of Josh Scott, and we were talking about something. I don't even remember what I don't know if you remember what we were talking about, but we started talking about Barry Goldwater. We talked about the Confederacy. We talked about Jefferson Davis. And here's this guy who was working for me as a security guard, and I was so impressed. And I read all the time. I study stuff, and I thought, I bet this kid thinks he's just some dumb hick, and I am more impressed with him than most of my college professors. Even I remember one time when I said I see no difference between Jefferson Davis, and I do forget who I said, and you said, well, they were very different people, and you taught me some stuff that I had never had heard before, and I was impressed. And I remember thinking, man, this kid's too good to be in security.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot to
you know,
me. I'm
and
definitely
so
I'm
just
definitely doing a lot
just
of praying about my spiritual life and where I should go if I should go back into something or whatnot. But those words mean a lot to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that you have a story, and it is, and what I say, and I'll just say this, that your story is your root is something that we both have. You told me about this teacher who was overbearing about this thing, and that is the story of the professional elites thinking they know more because they're in this position. You know what I mean? And I want you to hold on to that and be like, absolutely not. As a young kid, you knew that that was wrong. And as an adult, you could see it still happens and it's still wrong. And we build on from there. You know what I mean? The truth is the what I take as our spiritual background. Everything else is a discussion, and it should always be seen as a discussion. But thank you for having me on, and I'm glad that we got to meet, and I'm definitely open to come on to talk about whatever. I actually want you to do something for me, which I think will be actually pretty cool, which is once a month. I want you to record a 2 to 5 minute rant so I can play it on my show.
Okay.
So I think I and so if you don't feel like, hey, I don't have a whole episode, but something really stuck in your craw, or you have something you say, I got 2 minutes to talk about this. You come on, you give me that 2 minutes, and it'll give my audience a chance to hear a voice that they may not hear. Nobody is thinking about what do the people in Southwest Virginia think.
I can absolutely do
And thank you for having me on,
that.
man.
Absolutely.
And
Well, everyone give him a follow at the Darrell McCain Show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find him on Patreon. And I'll thank you very much for coming on, Darrell. Have a great day.
thank you.